In every movement there are disagreements, and that is a good thing. Competition for ideas give movements more potential strategies to go about their aims. However, it is important that there is consensus and a willingness to put aside banal aspirations to benefit the whole. Step in Bernard Chapin, an agent infiltrator, to create division amongst the MRM. Needless to say, I don't care much for Chapin and his right-wing or GTFO. I want to begin with a few caveats. 1. I don't hate libertarians. I think they diagnose the problem with society well, but then create a non sequitur solution of removing the state or proposing the state should be so small, ignoring the public's demand to have a large state. And 2. I know libertarians do not always equal Republican, and Chapin also applies, although he does hate the Democrats so much that he endorses Republican Party via character assassination of the other. 3. I am going to distinguish between collectivism and ideological Marxism, which Chapin merges into one. Collectivism is the idea of wealth redistribution socialism. Ideological Marxism, a coalition of groups that feel victimized in society. It includes the likes of women, ethnic minorities and homosexuals. Yes, the ideological left is feminist. Yes, it is largely anti-white heterosexual male. 4. As for the right, I am going to define as minimal government and maximum rights for each citizen, and not the fascism folly which is actually on the left. Comprehending the right, however, is not easy, as there has never really been a fully right-wing epoch in human history. Libertarians will say there was a time in 17th century USA where we were close to libertarianism, and they would be correct if it wasn't for the small matter of slavery amongst others. The 18th century UK is seen as laissez-faire. However, if there were no tariffs, the Irish famine could have been prevented, and so that too was not a true right-wing epoch. 5. My main emphasis is on whether men's rights is a left or right issue. I am not, and neither is the MRM, interested in whether men do better in a low-taxation environment. The key is in the name, men's rights movement. So let's begin. Is men's rights a left or right issue? The answer is no, and I will demonstrate why using circumcision or MGM. Now I have to admit my respect for Chapin increased tenfold when a few weeks ago he said circumcision should only be done through consent. However, why in 7 years is this the only time you bring up MGM? I checked your video titles through search and nothing. In fact, you only made that video because someone on Twitter called you out on it, that it was odd that you made a video entitled Men's Issues all in quotation marks and not mention a single men's issue but still find a way to end with let's reduce the state. MGM is illegal under Article 7 of human rights, and yet the practice persists. Now who is more sympathetic to eliminating MGM? The evil leftist statists with the mind of a slave, or the religious right? The right, with a few exceptions such as Stefan Molyneux, are largely religious and sure have traditionalist views. The right talks about this maximum rights, don't tread on me, leave everyone alone society, but they themselves are products of society. You, Bernard Chapin, for example, are an example of this. You want this leave me alone state, and yet you want women to be thrown in prison for 10 years for practicing bodily autonomy. Ron Paul goes even further, as he wanted to ban euthanasia and also went crying to the quote United Global Governance end quote to get a website without paying for it. Going back to MGM, the liberal left are more tolerant to the idea of banning MGM than the right will be. Did Ron Paul mention MGM once in his electoral campaign? I don't blame him, because it would have been suicidal if he did declare circumcision MGM, what with America being a Zionist nation. But this is yet another flaw of the right and why the right cannot exist. As long as there is a population with contrarian beliefs, politicians always have to be in mind of what they say and do. As for the collectivist left, sometimes you need to go left to go right. An example of this would be free contraception. The right, such as Bernard Chapin, will rally against it as an example of big evil socialism out to take more taxpayers' money. You failed to see the bigger picture, as those parasites go on to breed further generations of parasites and cost taxpayers far more than the cost for some pills and rubber. So once again, no, it is not a left or right issue. You rally against state bureaucracy, but the state can actually reduce bureaucracy, such as through the NHS. Under an NHS there is no needless paperwork for each citizen to sign up to every year. You get sick and you go to the hospital, and that is it. No need to worry about pre-existing conditions, whether your insurance can cover you or not. I am not saying the NHS is perfect, but ours is far superior to the US system pre-Obama. In fact, a recent study from the Commonwealth Fund has put the UK NHS as the best with the US as the worst. We are treating more people with far less resources, and this is possible largely because we don't have this huge bureaucracy that asks every UK citizen whether they have insurance. Again, I am not saying the public sector is superior to the private sector, just that in some cases it is. Indeed, last year a Swedish education firm folded and 1/4 private schools are now unprofitable. Who comes in to save the day? That evil socialist state. Sweden only has to look next door to Finland, to see the best education system is a statist one. Privatization can actually make a bureaucratic nightmare. For example, the contracted-out prisons of Georgia are 3 times less likely to respond to inquiries from the public and will often just slam the phone down or play stupid, such as transferring department to department, lying that they have never heard of an inquest or telling the inquirer to get some nonsensical legal jargon. On top of that, data collection is also privatized, and that brings an added level of complexity. They may charge for money to access the information, or because it's in the hands of private companies, you may not be able to access them on freedom of information grounds. Privatization works when there is competition, and even then it is still with ethical problems. I remember watching wrestling in the Attitude Era. It was great, fast-paced and with ladder matches almost on a weekly basis. However, a lot of those wrestlers died, and possibly because of this era. The needless and yet entertaining chair shots to the head caused concussions and may have even led to Chris Benoit murdering his family. He was, like most wrestlers in this era, high on steroids. We will never know if he and his family could have been saved, but there really should have been some buzzkiller bureaucrat telling the WWF and WCW no chair shots to the head. You and the hardcore libertarians rally against taxation as it is a form of theft. This simply isn't the case. If I were to go to the park and I leave a loaf of bread on the bench and the ducks eat my bread, do I say that the ducks stole my bread? No, we don't. Some may say this analogy isn't fair, but actually it is. Ducks don't have agency, and that is what there needs to be in order to call something theft. The government doesn't have agency, because for a start, it is not a single person but multiple individuals that are hugely outnumbered by those who are not part of the government. Furthermore, government, whether it be democracy or a monarchy, is an inevitability. We can look around the globe and every nation has a state, and this is true throughout history, and so it is only reasonable to conclude that hierarchy and civilization are a natural need for humans when dense populations occur. Obama acts as a cheerleader for the nation, a boo-hurrah, and the White House or Parliament is the venue for discontent. It acts as safety valve. Being a statist is no different than being a gravityist. Do men do better under smaller government? It depends on what you mean by smaller government. Free healthcare is a big government policy, but try a petition in the UK on whether they should abolish it and see how many get back to you on that. If it means a bunch of pen pushers telling you to dismantle the shed in your backyard for not having planning permission, then yes, we all suffer from that. However, I think you are looking at it the wrong way. Some bureaucracies definitely need to go, but these bureaucracies will disappear if you challenge the root problem behind them first. For example, 50-50 parenting should bring about the end of alimony and with it the state bureaucracies. Speaking of which, the state can actually create bureaucracies or social programs that actually benefit men, such as in Sweden and its paternity leave. This gives men the chance to be a real father, not just that man who leaves at 9-5, puts some food on table and does it all over again. Remember that song Cats in the Cradle? Going back to the 19th century, which is what libertarians want, would just force men into this worker-drone-provider model. Sweden, for all its problems and misandry, has a higher happiness index than America. It is normal for men to walk down streets of Sweden with prams. However, let's say you get your way and it really is a left v right issue. What makes you think women are going to vote for it? The 2012 election was won because women voted for Obama. Hell, if you won't take it from me, take it from Stefan Molyneux, who makes you look like a cop.
I think it's certainly true to say that as women have turned more and more to the state to give them resources, then the requirement for male virtue has gone down. Now, again, these are trends. I still hold individuals responsible, but I mean, this is why you can't shrink the state right now, is that there are too many child hostages. Yeah. I mean, you can't shrink the state because, let's say you're going to cut the welfare state by 50%. Well, the welfare state is almost exclusively serving the needs of single mothers. That's why there's a welfare state. It's because women are irresponsible with their eggs and because men are irresponsible with their sperm. And therefore, that lack of responsibility turns into a predatory clawing at the wallets of everybody who's kept it in their pants or at least in their balls. And so what would happen if you cut the welfare state? Well, these women who are not particularly attractive to a quality man, as I've sort of made the case before, oh, you have 2 kids, you're on welfare, you didn't finish high school, yeah, let's roll, right? I mean, that's just not, I mean, we sort of evolved above the lions, right? Like the lion, a new guy comes along, he just kills all the kids, right? Because he wants his genes to reproduce, right? So it's not to the point where the man will say, okay, you strangle those kids and we will get it on, right? I mean, some women do that, very few, but some women do. right? Well, the guy, he was going to leave me because of my kids, so I killed my kids. It's rare, but it happens.
Yes.
And so if you cut back the welfare state, where are these women going to get their resources from? Now, if it were just the women, I'd say, well, if you make these bad decisions, then like men, for the most part, you have to live with the consequences of those bad decisions. But they have children, which means to say they have hostages, right? And so what it's not the kids' fault. And so what is going to happen to the kids? And there's too many. There's too many. The single-parent households are far too common now. I mean, even if you could outvote them, which you can't because they have such a massive incentive to get resources, and men don't have as much incentive to deny those resources, right? Because it's not their kids who are hungry, right? So they're driven. They're single-minded, focused, get resources, right? And, a good woman does that by being a great wife and a great mom and a great friend. And, when my wife was breastfeeding, I was happy to provide as much income as I could while she was not working because I love her and she's a fantastic woman and never been, what's mine is hers and all that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So normally women get resources from a quality man, which is why men pursue quality and women should be attracted to it. But once the state steps in, there's just too many now. Like, literally, what would happen? I mean, children would get sick. Children might die. Children would go hungry because these women, what are they going to do? There'd be a transition period that would be really rough. And this is why I don't see any possibility of this. I mean, outside of women's general capacity to strike terror into the heart of men because of the history of being hit by so many women, which has diminished to a small degree because at least in a lot of places you can't hit kids in school anymore. But there's no possibility. I mean, all that would happen is the media would pounce on every child suffering as a result of the welfare cuts, and they would say, you see what the people who want to cut welfare are doing to these poor children? And the sad-eyed moms and the fear, and it's not possible. You can't stop it. It's got to crash.
I would also add that even if you shrink the state, then what? The state increases in size yet again and you have this never-ending war and no balance, which to be fair to Sweden at least they have balanced the budget and don't go on needless wars by people who claim to be on the right. You would also still have corporations lobbying for special treatment, so the symptom of the problem hasn't been fixed, and that is the political system itself. The American three-chamber system is a spectacular mess of corruption, with politicians buying their way to success. I subscribe to a guy called Review Tech User and he does commentary of games and other things. He brought up during the whole net neutrality thing a company called Wolfpack that tries to get money out of politics. There was also recently Ralph Nader on Reason TV promoting his book about how the left and the right were unifying against a common enemy of corruption and trying to get money out of politics. Why don't I hear you talking about this, Chapin? Because that's boring in comparison to your constant left bashing, which compared to you is 97% of America. Every day you get some article online written by a neurotic freak who writes something misandrous, say all the left are like this, and ignore the comments in the article below that mock the author or say they feel embarrassed to be a liberal. It's like saying all terrorists in the media are Muslim, therefore all Muslims are terrorists. The left bashing and scapegoating is hypocritical and just disguises the history of which the right and traditionalism are responsible for the fall of the family. The no man in the house rules were a condition that the conservative right included to force men into the provider role, and it backfired disastrously, and yet the left will be the ones who will be blamed. Or what about the tender years doctrine? A mother comes crying to Parliament in the supposedly small state UK Parliament, because she, like many men today, couldn't see her children, and these so-called right-wing free marketers in the blink of an eye throw generations of future fathers into the debtors' prisons to enforce their postcard image of the world. You Chapin are ironically the most Marxist man I know. You censor comments who do not agree with you. You say you debate people, but in your About section you tell those on the left to get lost. You have rebuilt the Marxist dialectic of class warfare and changed it into alignment warfare, and in doing so have polarized half the population. You call these defectors mentally ill and advocate for a revolution of a 10% state. The irony would be funny if it wasn't for your appeal and the damage you have done to the MRM. Conclusion. If you want a libertarian revolution, you are not going to get it in the MRM. The MRM is here to get concessions, and as such, if you want to advocate for libertarianism, do so on your own time, leave your utopias of anarchism at the door. Don't, however,